Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PR Explored. I'm your host, Michelle Garrett, a public relations consultant, and PR Explored is a video podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. And today, my guest is Gina Tabasso. Gina is a B2B growth strategist working with small to mid sized companies. And I am really happy to have you today, Gina. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again.
I would love, as we kind of, get ready, we're going to be talking about our topic today in just a couple of minutes. But as we get into that, well, before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and anything that you want to share? And I'll put some links in the comments as you are sharing. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, I started out my career back in the day. It wasn't called marketing, it was called advertising. And my first job out of college was with a manufacturer because client side paid more than agencies paid. And then I worked in construction for a while and in distribution. Took a little couple ventures out to get CPG experience and work for a university, but my heart was with manufacturing, so I ended up going back into that industry. And then I started my own consulting firm a few years ago and have gone out on my own, and I do B2B growth strategy for small to mid-sized B2B companies. And what that means is I help them grow revenue by aligning sales, marketing, and operations. And then I stay on board to lead the implementation of the marketing portion of the strategy and make recommendations for other partners who I see opportunities for, whether that's sales coaching or strategic planning or M&A. So I tend to look at organizations very holistically.
Yes, and I feel like it's obviously this is something that they really need, and I have known you for a few years now, and I just feel like you there aren't a lot of people in this space, so I really respect and appreciate what you offer because everything that you share on LinkedIn, I feel like it's very it's very real, but it's very helpful.
Thank you. You have been such a supporter. I really appreciate that. There are some people who, regularly comment on posts and like them, and it just warms your heart. It makes you think that, you're not throwing stuff out there into a vacuum and that people actually care about what you have to say.
Well, isn't that true? And with LinkedIn more than ever, because
With AI, all the AI generated stuff.
yeah, you could post and you think nobody's paying attention, so it's always nice when somebody is actually interacting with what you have to say. And like I said, everything really resonates with me, and that's why, I wanted to talk to you today because I'm going to put up the piece that kind of spurred my invitation to you to come on because I feel like it's just a topic that we don't uh, maybe talk about enough. And even before we went on today, we were kind of talking about how manufacturers can be a little bit sometimes they're a little slower on the marketing side sometimes because I think in my like experience, like it's mostly based on relationships and kind of that they would call it the old boy network. I don't know if that's really a term we want to use anymore, but yeah, so they don't really always see the need for marketing, for PR, for communications and things like that. So that's that's kind of what caught my eye. So, and we're going to be talking about the let me pull up your piece because I forget what the name of it was, but I just remember that it was really it really resonated with me because I feel like a lot of times manufacturers do have a tendency to put this off, and even more so now. Again, as we were talking beforehand, the most expensive customer acquisition strategy is waiting. So they're waiting on things to change, to improve, for the uncertainty to kind of clear up, and that might not really serve them very well.
Well, I also did prior to that newsletter you read, I did one last year about how uncertainty really needs to be baked in to our environment. I mean, nothing's new. COVID happened, storms in Texas that took out petrochemical plants happened, the backup in the Suez Canal happened, a shortage of shipping containers happened, a shortage of logistics and truck drivers happened. Now, the new government's policies have happened with tariffs and reshoring and supply chain disruptions. So it's been years now. And even before COVID, other stuff happened. So if
Yeah.
people keep, life is cyclical. Life is a roller coaster ride, even in your own personal life. So it's no different in business. There's ups and downs. There's, downturns and upturns.
Yeah. And that's what my manufacturing clients, that I've been working with for a while, and when I interview the CEO to kind of, we maybe write, pieces, thought pieces, trend pieces, thought leadership and things. That's what they will talk about, is the fact that, you have to be resilient and you have to kind of be thinking ahead and be prepared, but like anything can happen at any time. And again, just like you were saying, I've seen this with my clients. It's like, yes, there's always something that's going to impact the business, because there have been times when gas prices went up, which means diesel fuel goes up, not just right now, but that's happened before. And then that affects prices, and if work affects, the ability to ship things, and all of that. So that's just an example, but there's always, yeah, I mean, and think about, like the aging out of the workforce, and some of the manufacturing,
Mhm.
companies and things like that. So there are always things that they're going to have to, um, just kind of roll with, and that doesn't mean that you should stop marketing and just pull back entirely. So that's what I want to talk about today. And let's just get into our questions. And if anyone has a question, please feel free to share, and we will, be happy to try to address anything that's on your mind. So let's talk about, how economic conditions can impact marketing budgets, because sometimes companies pull back when they perceive there's an economic downturn.
Yeah, I kind of went over that in when I was talking about the impacts that create uncertainty and what causes people to pull back. But what I tell my clients, and not all my clients are manufacturing clients. I've worked with tech and SaaS companies, AI companies, funded startups. But in the B2B space, the typical marketing budget that a company should be spending is 3 to 5% of revenue. And I find most of them aren't even spending 0.5%. And then they wonder why they see marketing as a cost center rather than a revenue generator, because they're doing this scattershot approach. Like, let's throw money at a wall and hope it sticks. Oh, this doesn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. Oh, marketing doesn't work. And I tell them, it's a strategic process, like a process on your shop floor. You're trying to go to the end of the process. You're trying to do no marketing ever. You don't have a CRM. Your website is 20 years old, and you want to hire someone to do lead generation. That's the
Mhm.
end of the process.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that on your shop floor. Don't do that in your marketing. And so I think with all those economic barriers, they end up cutting costs that they see as non-essential. And for a lot of like manufacturing companies, essential is the shop floor. It's producing product.
Mhm.
And so they scale back a lot of other areas of the business. And then what I always see is, and we can talk about even the next thing we said we were going to talk about, which is the process, that it's a continuing process.
Mhm.
So I find what happens is inevitably leads dry up, the funnel is empty, cash flow ceases, and that's when the panic begins. Like, we need to hire a new salesperson, we need to get marketing, we need to generate leads. And that's because you need to constantly be filling that funnel. We need to be bringing in and nurturing leads all the time, because I forget what the statistic is. I shared it in another LinkedIn newsletter I did, but something really low. It's something like 3% of people are ready to buy now. So
Mhm.
we're looking for that 3%. What about the 97%?
Right.
It doesn't mean they're not ready to buy at all. They're just not ready to buy now.
Mhm.
So those people need to be nurtured. And I also tell people that in manufacturing, sales cycles are really long in any B2B business. Sales cycles are a year and a half typically. And so, how can you expect a marketer to generate and convert leads in like 30 days when your sales cycle is a year and a half? You've got to stay in front of these new people for a year and a half to convince them to buy. And always, as people exit the funnel, you need to fill the funnel with new people. It's just continual process. Um, so I just wanted to kind of share that.
Yeah, I think that's often, when we talk about, I mean, for me, sometimes people ask me, "Well, what do you mean when you say B2B?" They don't really understand. Well, it's business to business, of course, but what's different about it? Because, of course, I have also worked with clients in consumer, industries and all kinds of industries, but there's something different about B2B because the budgets are bigger. It's often like a committee of people making the buying decisions, and the cycle is longer, so you do have to continually be out there. It's not like you can issue a press release once a year and expect, that people are gonna see that. I mean, you kinda have to be thinking about, things that you're gonna be sharing and talking about across all kinds of channels, and, your website, you mentioned that, is really the hub of your marketing or should be, and I think often with, manufacturers, I see sometimes the first thing I do if somebody gets in touch with me is go look at their website, and if their website hasn't been updated in years, that's probably the first place they need to focus because we don't wanna be directing attention, unless they're kind of ready for that, so that's just another hurdle, I guess.
I tend to find that um, the two things that need to be done right away is fixing up the website and standing up a CRM. Very few manufacturers and B2B companies I've worked with are using a CRM. And so you can't track your return on investment or the buyer journey
Mhm.
without that important piece of software. And it's not expensive, even enterprise level. When I work with small to mid-sized businesses, that's usually like 50 million or less in revenue, usually maybe 100 people or less. And the CRM that I use that I've stood some of my clients up on, it's $99 a month. So that's not like people think they've got to go with the HubSpots or the Click
Yeah.
Dimensions or, Microsoft Dynamics and that they've got to spend, $15,000 a year on a CRM. Most of those are too sophisticated for a company that's just starting to use a CRM. And I always tell people HubSpot free version is never free. It's free for this long, and then you need to add Sales Hub and Marketing Hub, and then you have to pay for more seats, and you have more than 1,000 contacts, and you've got to start paying for more contacts. So it adds up really quickly.
Yes, and, I feel like I mean, I do use tools, of course, but I'm not a tool heavy, um, marketer, I guess. I say a lot of it is you can be accomplished without it's more about the expertise. That's kinda more where I would say invest your money in somebody who knows what they're doing versus because I know of companies who will just spend thousands of dollars on tools and they never even use them. They don't even have the login information with their
Yes.
media database, for example, or something like that. I'm like, "Well, what good is that doing you? You could reallocate that money to somebody who could actually carry out, media outreach for you or help you with some thought leadership or something." The expert can help you depending on your needs and your situation, but just paying for tools and, I don't know that that's really necessary always. But so now we've kind of gone into question 2, which is, marketing is a continuous process. It's not something you can just kinda it's not a faucet, you just turn it on and off, and it has to be something or it doesn't work, and you were saying that earlier too, is like sometimes they'll try something, it didn't work because they're doing continuous, they're not making continual efforts, and so then, of course, it's probably not gonna work as well, so
Well, I like to explain it this way, especially through my years of working, I've put a lot of tools in my toolkit, which is why I'm not just a marketer anymore. I'm a growth strategist. And two of the things that really changed my life were becoming Sandler sales trained and getting a certification and doing a year of sales mastery, which is basically weekly meetings with your coaches to do like role playing and scenarios. And then I earned my Lean Six Sigma yellow and green belts, and I'm a black belt candidate now. I'm partway through my black belt. And Lean Six Sigma, a lot of people don't know what it is if you're
Mhm.
not in the manufacturing space, but it's not just being used in manufacturing anymore. As a matter of fact, I use it at home. So what it is, it's two different methodologies. So Lean tries to focus on increasing speed and eliminating waste. Six Sigma focuses on data and reducing defects. So, um, so those started out on the shop floor of manufacturing companies, improving processes in manufacturing. But I got my training at a university. I worked for a university, and because they taught Lean Six Sigma, they wanted their leadership team to all have belts and to do 3 projects a year. And then I was saying how I do it at home. Think about a simple process that a lot of us do. And Michelle and I were talking earlier about how we all both have cats. And so one day I'm going to feed my cats, and I do what everybody else does. I go to the floor, I pick up the bowl, I take the bowl to the counter. I go to the closet, I get the bag of dry food, I take it to the counter. I fill up the bowl, I take the bowl back to the floor. I go back to the counter, get the bag of food, put it back in the cupboard. Well, my Lean Six Sigma brain one day went off and said, "Dummy, it's dry food. You don't wash the bowl every day. Take the bowl to the bag or the bag to the bowl. Why are you making all these trips to the counter?" And, that's an example of a process improvement on a very simple level. So I like that the fact that and I tell marketers this is a good tip. Marketers who are getting more like mid-career sometimes ask me, what would you recommend I learn? And I tell them, if you can learn to speak other languages, and I don't mean Spanish or Japanese, if you can learn to speak other languages, add those tools to your toolkit. As marketers, a lot of people add marketing tools to their toolkit.
Mhm.
What made me go to the next level was when I added sales to my toolkit and I added Lean Six Sigma. So now I can go into a company and speak the language of sales, the language of marketing, and the language of operations. And I
Mhm.
can get all those teams into alignment, which
Mhm.
is something as just a marketer I couldn't have done 20 years ago. Um, so I encourage people to learn other methodologies, and like even now I've been learning about theory of constraints and like applying that. What are your bottlenecks in your facility? So there's a lot of valuable things out there that if you're a consultant, bring those to your clients and make yourself even more valuable.
Yes, because, honestly, we are not, focused on one with sometimes if we're working with a client, we get asked to do a lot of things that we might not even they might not have brought us in to do originally, but it's just part of, the process of working with them. So, it's always helpful if you can bring all that to the table, I think. So, yeah. Um, let's talk for a minute about, um, the buying cycle. So, uh obviously, we were talking a little bit earlier about how many there's only a very small percentage of people who are ready to buy right now. So, there are people at different points, along the, path to making a buying decision or even to researching vendors or anything like that. So, maybe we can talk a little bit about, why, it's a continuous process, but let's talk about maybe some different points in the process.
Yeah, that's one of the things I usually include. I include that in my strategy to educate my clients about the stages of the buyer journey. And, you
Mhm.
know, simplified, there's usually more than 3 stages. But if you just look at top, middle, and bottom of funnel, the top of the funnel is just awareness. People don't know who you are. You need to make them aware that you exist. So that is very early on in the process. Then they move through like the consideration phase where they're considering buying something, they're starting to shop around, they're interested in learning more, they want some education. And then they get to a point where they have the intent to buy and then they make a decision. So that's where they make the purchase. Well, that's where a lot of sales teams think the sale ends, at the purchase point of the process.
Mhm.
And then we move
Right.
on and try to find our next lead. But there's one more layer people forget about, which is the loyalty, the advocacy portion. And that actually is my Lean Six Sigma Black Belt project. I worked for a manufacturer who had no feedback mechanism from their customers. It was kind of like someone's unhappy, they send an email. Someone's happy, they compliment a salesperson. That salesperson may or may not share it with the rest of the team. It definitely doesn't get shared with other customers or other prospects. So I said, let's capture this customer feedback and then take it one step further. So I did a net promoter score, and we've all taken them. You know, your car dealership sends you that scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good did we do on these points? Anybody who gave us an 8 or above, we asked them for a Google review.
Oh, yeah.
That helps with SEO and organic search.
Yeah.
Then anybody who gave us a 7 or below, we reached out to see how we could fix it. You know, what did we do wrong? How can we improve? We want to get better. We want to make sure this never happens again. And believe it or not, we turned some haters, some people who were really unhappy, into giving us a second chance,
Oh,
and they
wow.
became advocates. We won their business back because we showed them that they matter and that they were heard and that we were sorry and we took accountability. Um, so that's kind of how I tell people that buyers move through the process of purchase.
Yeah, because there seems like there's too much of a focus on, the actual, piece when they are buying and when they are making the sale, and I'm like, wow, it starts, so far. I mean, most people by the time they're contacting sales have already done all the research and, like online. I mean, isn't that I've seen that statistic because buyers are younger now than they used to be, and of course everybody just goes on and does search, and now we have AI search, which I think might be one of my questions coming up. But yeah, so you really need to make sure that you're showing up. And to do that, again, you can't just write one blog post or issue one press release or, it's kind of like it's something you have to be thinking about and working on all the time.
Mhm.
Um, so let's talk about, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of talk a little bit more about it. What portion of a company's budget should be allocated to marketing generally?
Yeah, in the B2B space, it's less than in B2C. So I tell my clients usually 3 to 5% of revenue is a target on what to invest in your marketing budget. And I mean, the thing is with marketing, like the sky's the limit. There's so much that you could do. You could do $100,000 program. You could do a $70,000 program. I had a client who wanted to do their entire, they were $32 million manufacturer, and they only wanted to spend $40,000 a year on their marketing. And then, you wonder why you don't move the dial. Like you're not going to get real far with that kind of budget.
So,
So, or they want to spend $500 a month on Google ads. That's not going to get you anything. You might as well not even do it. So, yeah, that's what I recommend, really.
well, it's funny because I often work with companies that have a very small marketing team. Sometimes team of one person doing their marketing. So then they do outsource things like maybe PR content, different email marketing, different parts of the program. But it's really interesting to me because I feel like, um, a lot of companies don't allocate enough toward marketing, and then you have companies that are just really, I mean, hopefully their expectations are in line with what they're willing to invest in the marketing, because that's sometimes not the case.
I mean, if as an example, if you're an $8 million B2B company, 3% of revenue would be $240,000.
Hmm.
I'm never seeing an $8 million company spend 240 on their marketing. And I'm lucky if I see usually the maximum is half of that, like 1.5%. But I think the majority of people I've met are doing no marketing or spending like 0.5% on their budget. And that's just why they're not moving the dial. And they're putting, other thing that does is that puts all of the burden on the salespeople. They
Yeah.
have to do lead gen, they have to do lead nurturing, they have to warm people up. And you think about how many lost sales you could have, because salespeople just want volume, they want commission. So they call, get turned down, call 6 times, get turned down, next, closed deal, lost, closed, lost, let's move on to the next person, closed, lost, let's move on to the next person. Where if you continue to nurture those leads, they might convert eventually. And the sales team isn't being given the support that they need. They're not being given the materials they need. And
Hmm.
so I feel bad for companies that don't have marketing, because those salespeople are really overloaded and burnt out.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you think that there are times when a company should adjust their marketing budget? I mean, if they're launching a new product, I mean, what are some examples of when you would, increase or decrease or make and adjust your budget?
Yeah, I would definitely, with a new product launch, that takes a lot of effort. So a new product or service launch, there's usually some additional budget allocation. Like I have a client, a prospective client that I'm working with, that they sell cranes, like gantry cranes for manufacturing facilities. They started a second company where they're selling hoists. Well, they had to allocate additional budget to the hoist company. So they stopped doing the marketing for the crane company, because that's a longer sales cycle and a harder sell. So they're
Mhm.
trying to ramp up the sales for the hoist company to generate some quick sales and quick revenue that they can then reinvest into the crane company to do marketing for that. Another time to adjust budget is honestly in a bad economy. Like, it's a bad economy, tariffs, supply chain reshoring, everybody's tucking in and not spending. But
Mhm.
then you all were here, and now we're here being really conservative and waiting, 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 waiting.
Mhm.
When everything breaks open, you're going to have all that ground to catch up. So the people
Yeah.
who are going to be ahead of the pack are the ones who, in that tough time, are investing. Because think of it, if your sales cycle is a year and a half, you need to be doing the marketing now to get those sales a year and a half from now. So if you're
Yeah.
waiting until things get better, you're going to have to wait another year and a half. So you're going to be waiting 3 years instead of a year and a half. So that's when I tell people that they really should adjust.
Yeah. I'm actually writing this down. You have to be forward thinking. It's a year and a half. You have to be thinking, like, what do you want to happen in a year and a half from now? And then what do you need to do to get to that point?
It's like a chess
So
game, right?
yeah, and I don't think that, I mean, and I have a lot of empathy for them, because I know people are just, of course, they're always stretched really thin, and they're, inundated with things that they're trying to do that have to be done this week or today or whatever. But I mean, if you really can play the long game and be that forward thinking, consistent, company that's out there, I think that does really pay off. And I mean, I've seen it with my own clients. So
I know it is hard, especially in manufacturing. There's high overhead, there's low margin. People are always price conscious. So, like a lot of my customers, my clients, that's their biggest pain point, is like, you're too expensive, you're too expensive, you're too expensive. Well, we've got really expensive equipment and automation and robotics, like that doesn't pay for itself. So, if you're buying on price rather than quality or service, we're not the company for you. And so people are always looking for like the cheapest deal. But in B2B businesses, I always equate things back to my personal life. Cheapest always isn't always better. So sometimes you buy the better bicycle, or you buy the nicer car, or the better motorcycle, or a better quality clothing, and because it lasts longer, or it looks nicer, or it fits better, or it has more features to it. And
Mhm.
so we do that in our personal lives, but then in business, people are like, "Oh, we want the cheapest price. Let's get the lowest bid."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting because I mean, sometimes you work with clients and they might not be the cheapest option, but they have, they're higher quality, they provide better customer service, they have been in business a long time and have a good reputation, they're gonna
Mhm.
be there, when you need them, so there are reasons beyond price, but yes, I know exactly what you're saying. And so I mean, this kind of dovetails into the next question, which is what can happen if a company kind of pulls too far back on its marketing efforts?
I see it all the time. That's when people call me. So they're not doing any marketing, or they're doing very little marketing. And what usually ends up happening is the funnel dries up. Like there's no leads coming in, sales slow down, cash flow ceases, and then people panic and then reach out to someone to do lead generation and work miracles. And so that's why I tell people it's a process. Like I set up expectations in my discovery calls with potential clients. I tell them if you've never done marketing before, your first year of marketing is foundational. We've got
Yes,
to fix up your website. We've got to stand up a CRM. We've got to clean up your lists. We've got to start generating a ton of content that you don't have. We've got to get SEO in place. And then maybe the last few months of the year, we can turn toward, paid ads or LinkedIn outreach or whatever.
right.
But it's not the first year of ever doing marketing. You're probably not going to see a huge return on investment. I One of my clients, I they told me their sales cycle was a year and a half. In the time I worked with them for 1 year. After 6 months, I generated a lead for them that converted into a customer. And that one customer was like $74,000 for the order. So it paid for my entire year of marketing and then a few $1,000 on top of that. So it's like, okay, if you got a whole year of a marketing team for free, you're doing pretty good. And so then they were like, "Oh, marketing's not working. We don't want to proceed. We don't want to continue a year two." Well, then the following year, because again, they told me their sales cycle was a year and a half. The following year, all these leads and sales started to pop that we had generated, and they got a ton of sales the following year. They sent me a couple gifts. They were like, "Thank you. You were right. We were wrong." And so, that's kind of the benefit of marketing consistently.
Yeah, and I mean, they do see the benefit, but it's hard to prove it until they see it, you know what I mean? So it's just like that cycle of trying to convince them, and then once they see it, they get it. But yeah, a lot of companies won't believe and understand that that's what it takes. So, I mean, everything you're saying just resonates. But yeah, so let's see. Um, I mean, this question is obviously pretty like we've already talked about it, but I mean,
Mhm.
there are a lot of benefits of marketing consistently and not kind of coming in and out, and I think we've talked about that, but is there anything else you want to say about that?
Um, well, we kind of alluded to it earlier. Like, let's talk about the client I was just talking about. So you do a year of marketing, then you stop. The following year, all these sales start converting from what we generated that first year and that year and a half sales cycle. Then, if you don't do any marketing during that year that all the sales are popping, which they didn't, because they're getting in all kinds of money. They're like, oh, we don't need to do marketing. We're getting all these sales.
Yeah.
Well, then if you aren't doing it during that year, what happens the following year? The leads dry up again. So it's this constant, repeating the mistake and then trying to catch up and getting behind and trying to catch up. And so I think if people stay on top of it, you never fall behind and get in that situation.
And it applies to across the board, right? We're talking about, we both work with B2B companies and a lot of manufacturing clients and things. But I mean, even as me, as a single person business, I find the same thing. And I hear other consultants and freelancers say, well, I don't, I'm, my leads are drying up. I don't have any clients. I'm running out of, but they weren't, a lot of times their head was down. They were working, which I understand, but they weren't doing anything to market themselves and stay out there in front of their potential clients.
That's the
So,
thing. I'm not a hypocrite. I practice what I preach. The majority of my time I spend marketing my own business. I'm doing everything. I'm guesting on podcasts. I'm starting a webinar series. I'm doing LinkedIn newsletters. I'm doing email marketing. I'm doing LinkedIn posts. I'm going to in-person events. I'm going to networking meetings. I go to conferences and trade shows. So I'm doing LinkedIn outreach and appointment setting. I'm doing warm calling. The only thing I'm not doing for my business is I
mhm,
haven't paid for any ads. I'm not
right.
paying for ads because as a consultant, I don't feel that that's going to get me traction. That's the other thing. I wanted to go to our last question you had because this segues perfectly into that.
Okay.
Um, so Michelle had asked me earlier, like if a company's on a tighter marketing budget, what are some suggestions on what to focus on?
Yeah.
What I just told you is it. I came up through the organic ranks through SEO and now AEO and GEO. And you can get a lot of traction with content, with press releases, with backlinks, with Google reviews, with claiming local listings, with social media. And so I, even YouTube, like Google owns YouTube, they factor video very heavily into their algorithm. I have a YouTube channel. Do a lot of people watch my videos? No. Do I care? No. I optimize the description with my keywords. Google crawls YouTube and says, oh, Gina's putting up a video every week. This is great. She's a thought leader in her space. And that factors into the SEO ranking.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yes, if people watched it, I would get ranked even higher because they do factor in comments and likes and all that stuff.
Sure.
But the fact that I have a presence and then I've got content that I can constantly add to my blog on my website. So my website is ranking because it's showing that I'm active and constantly posting new information. So yeah, that's what I would say is, and I'm doing it with my current client. They We decided to reallocate budget away from Google ads into content and into organic because
No, that's right.
organic is just the work, just the creating the content. It's not any additional spend like $3,500 a month on Google ads. And in B2B, Google ads aren't always the best way to go, especially now that people are searching through AI. Um, I think SEO is the best way to go, and the PR and media relations because of those backlinks and those all those backlinks you get from magazines or trade publications or newspapers,
Yeah.
those count as citations in AI. So that's what boosts your ranking in AI is all those citations you get. So that's what I'd focus on now.
I'm exactly like you because I don't really spend money on my marketing, but I do spend a lot of time on it,
Mhm.
and I put effort into it. And I enjoy doing a lot of those things, and I also use myself as a guinea pig because some of the things that I learn, of course, I can apply to my clients as well. So I feel like it benefits every part of what I'm doing, and I really believe in that. And I do think a lot of people forget that Google owns YouTube, and that's the whole reason that I got on YouTube as well, because, I yeah, you're right. I mean, it may not be like we're not obviously maybe at the top of the ranking, but that doesn't matter because it's important for search, and that's how a lot of people that are coming to me now, prospects, are actually talking to Chat GPT or their platform of choice to find me, even though I still get referrals, and I give business other ways. That's becoming more common, and they will tell me that you came up because I ask all these questions and you were at the top of the list or whatever. So, and then whether or not it pans out, it doesn't always, but like it is definitely something that's I'm hearing and seeing more. So.
These were all good questions. I appreciate you digging out the information by asking the right questions. That's so important in an interview. Or years ago, I was a journalist. And so I interviewed a lot of people to write my articles. And I would say the best journalists are best detectives and researchers. And so it's always about asking the right questions.
Well, I appreciate that. No, but I have a journalism degree. I
Uh,
I and writing is kind of my and interviewing people. I mean, I always have enjoyed those things a lot, so I'm really, that's I'm glad to hear you say that because
I
I do try to, like, actually put some effort into these.
Yeah, I
Is
have
there
a
anything
journalism degree and 2 English degrees, so I'm a writer through and through too.
My daughter's studying English right now, so yeah. Is there anything else that you wanna share?
Um, I had something in my brain, and when we started talking about journalism, it left my brain. I
You can
don't
take a
remember.
minute and think, and I'm gonna put up your sites, your website and, some of these other links again. I know that, let's see, is there anything else? I'm looking here at my notes too. Um, yeah, so you mentioned that, you help obviously with the, if you have to when they go to implement the strategy, sometimes you have to bring in strategic partners. Do
Mm-mm.
you wanna talk about that a little bit? Do you have like a because that's always a tricky one, I think. It's like, sometimes I have to do kind of a similar thing or just, there's something they ask me for that I don't do. So then I have to
Mhm,
make a recommendation. I'm always like, you have to be really careful with that because, you don't wanna recommend somebody that you don't think is gonna do a great job for them
mhm.
because it impacts your reputation.
And in you asking me that, I remembered the other thing I was gonna talk about.
Okay.
So it all kinda goes together. So I'll start by not answering your question and going to what I was gonna talk about because then it goes into your question. So, as part of a strategy, when I go in and do a growth strategy for a company, two of the big things I do, and this came up in my brain because of us talking about journalism and asking good questions and interviewing people. I first do a complete comprehensive sales assessment. I interview the entire sales team and I ask them a list of about 40 questions to look at everything, their process, their playbook, their sales cycle, their timelines, their experience, um, what they like about their job, what they don't, what they think could be improved. And then I also interview 3 to 5 of the company's current, former, or ideal clients, and I do voice of customer work. And I ask over 20 questions to them, and it's basically an external SWOT analysis. I look at how do the customers perceive the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then I do an internal SWOT analysis with the leadership team. 99% of the time, the internal SWOT and the external SWOT do not match. How you perceive yourself is not the way everyone else perceives you.
Mhm.
And what matters is how the customers perceive you. So it's getting those into alignment. So with that said, that's where you uncover those opportunities. And sometimes the opportunities have nothing to do with me. They don't have anything to do with marketing. The sales team, they're amazing engineers and machinists who've come up from the shop floor. They can talk product specification all day, but they've
Mhm.
got no sales training and they don't know how to close and convert. That's going to cause a problem for me showing an ROI on my work if they can't convert those leads I bring in because they're just order takers. They need to get a sales coach. I'm not a sales coach. I know
Mhm.
guys that I'm strategic partners with that I would recommend and put my reputation on the line for. I also look at their strategic plan. What are your 3 to 5 year goals? Because that's going to inform my marketing strategy. Wait a minute, you don't have a strategic plan? You need a strategic plan, Mr. $10 million manufacturer. I don't do strategic planning, but I have a partner who's an EOS person who can come in and do a strategic plan for you. Um, I ask questions like M&A, like what is your succession plan? What 5 years from now do you plan on staying in the company, selling the company, turning the company over to someone else, or closing the company? Because what I'm going to recommend from a marketing perspective is going to be very different based on those scenarios because we're prepping you for 5 different scenarios.
Yeah.
So if they say, well, I plan on selling the company, I'll say, do you have an M&A person in place to help you value the company? And they're like, no, it's 5 years from now. And I tell them, do you realize it takes 3 to 5 years to value a company for sale? If you think you're going to wait 5 years and then try to sell it, you're probably not. So I know an M&A guy. I don't do that, but I can introduce you to someone. So those are the kind of strategic partners I have so that I can create like a holistic environment where I can help a manufacturer solve any pain point. And in solving those pain points, that helps them grow. So that's why I'm now a growth strategist and not just a fractional CMO.
Yeah. And I think it's really, interesting too, because I think a lot of companies, I mean, I know in the manufacturing space, I have a client who's acquiring, some smaller companies, and that is their growth strategy, right? That's part of their growth strategy. So,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of companies do wanna, I mean, maybe they've been around 50 years, 75 years, 100 years. It's been in the family, or, maybe the founder owner is getting ready to retire, and they just want a good home for a good steward to take care of what they've built. And so, but some companies, don't, they don't want to go that route. So anyway, it's really interesting to me. And this is something I had never, known a lot about until I started working with this client, because the CEO talks openly about it, and it's a long process. Like, they
Yeah.
get to know each other at trade shows and events, and it's something that happens over time. So
My friend is an M&A advisor, and he actually buys up manufacturing companies, smaller ones, 5 to 8 million dollars, $5 to 10 million.
mhm,
And he looks at the ones that are actually in distress because he said the bottleneck at those companies is always the CEO, owner, and president. If they would get out of their own way, the company would grow. And so what he does is he buys the company, he fires them, he takes over, he puts in the proper processes, and the companies become incredibly profitable, and then he can sell them. So
yeah.
yeah, it's just that's another thing advice I would give people is network, network, network. Build your network. I am only as strong as my network, and I have so many people supporting me and so many people I can call on that I'm not alone. So, as a solopreneur, I'm not alone. I have a team,
Mhm.
and that's very powerful. It's even in the downturn times, that's sometimes what gets you through it is people are there to help you through the struggle and kind of raise you up and look out for each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, because again, it's cyclical, and we know that, it's never gonna just be like there's always gonna be ups and downs, and
Yep,
things happening. So we
the
have to
roller
kinda
coaster of life.
stick together and support each other, when we can. So yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for always supporting me too through the roller coaster ride. And I'm glad that we're friends, and I'm glad we were able to get together again.
Me too, Gina. I really enjoyed this conversation, and again, I think that you're one of the wiser people in my network on the manufacturing and B2B side, and I'm always interested in what you have to say. And yeah, I really hope that everybody who listens or watches gets something. I'm sure they will take something away from this that will help them.
I
And I've
really,
put all of Gina's links in the comments.
I
Please
really want to
follow.
all the listeners and followers here, I am a servant leader, and I believe if I do the right thing, the money will come. And I love to help people. So if anything I said resonated with you that you want to talk about more, or you want advice on, or to brainstorm, please reach out. I'd be happy to add you to my network. So, maybe I can't help you, but maybe I know someone who can.
Yes, and I put your LinkedIn in there and, of course, your website and your link to your webinars and all of those links, but I really hope people will find you on LinkedIn and follow you because you do post a lot of great things on there, and that would be a great way, to, get to know you and vice versa, so, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thanks for being here, Gina, and I wanna thank people, everybody who tuned in and today, and I will be back in a couple of weeks, with another episode of PR Explored. Thanks so much.